Okay, so we are going to get started. Just want to thank everyone for being here today. This is the second workshop in the Grad School Week series that is taking part this week. And this is writing the personal statement. And we have a really wonderful group of speakers for today's session. But definitely want to thank everybody for being present for this workshop, for taking time out of your day, and really hope that this session is going to be valuable to you in terms of how to construct an excellent personal statement. So I believe we're going to begin with some introductions. So I'm going to allow all of our speakers to introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Kimberly Buck-Speck, and I'm the Director of Pre-Professional Health Studies.
And I am Barbara Gorka, the Director of Scholar Development and Fellowships Advising. My office also does do some support for graduate school personal statements, and I'll just put in a plug that even though the focus of today's session is on personal statements for graduate school applications, a lot of what we are talking about is valid for fellowship or scholarship personal statements as well.
Hi, good afternoon to you all. I'm Darla Himeles. I'm the Assistant Director of the Writing Center, part of the larger Student Success Center here at Temple. And I'm happy to see some familiar names in the participant list from Writing Center sessions. And we support writers with personal statements every day. So any questions about that support or how to access it, you can write me.
And finally, my name is Mark Kaloko, and I'm the Senior Career Coach at the Temple University Career Center. And our role at the Career Center is to support students with all their professional development goals. A lot of times that can be first-time employment, but sometimes that's graduate school. And so we actually go over personal statements as well. And I'll be sharing a little bit of a perspective from our office. I'll also be kind of helping out a little bit with the chat today. So definitely, if you have questions as we go throughout the presentation, feel free to kind of put that in the chat and I'll respond, or maybe one of our speakers will also respond. Just want to reiterate again that we are recording today's session. This is going to be for everyone that's here today, but also for those that registered but just weren't able to attend. And so, yeah, we're really glad to have everybody here wanting to learn more about personal statement writing, but we actually wanted to learn a little bit more about you. So we actually have a poll that we want to start with. So let me actually pull that up right now. And we'd like to get some information about what kind of degree path you are currently seeking. So you can fill out that poll kind of before we get started. All right, so I think we got a pretty good degree of responses here. Let's see if I can end this poll. Is everybody able to see that? So some very interesting. What do we have here? What do we have here in terms of who's represented? Definitely seeing some master's degrees. Those are pursuing master's degrees, professional degrees, and probably within the health profession, some law school. Some are interested in PhD programs. And it's all right. We are definitely very comfortable with those that are not sure what degree path they might want to pursue. So hopefully, no matter what you're thinking, this session is going to be really helpful to you on how do you actually put together a personal statement. So I'm going to hand this off to Barbara to kind of kick us off.
Hey, Mark, I'm still seeing the poll results. Do you want to close that?
You can close it yourself.
Oh, I can't. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So today's session, just to give you a sense of what we'll be talking about, we've already done the introductions. We're going to talk about the key elements of a personal statement, talking about common pitfalls and things to avoid when you're preparing your personal statement. We'll be looking at a couple of sample introductory paragraphs, which is often one of the hardest things to write in a personal statement, and then ending with additional tips and resources. And again, to reiterate, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in chat, and we'll do our best to moderate. If we know that a topic is going to be coming up, we might save that response for that point. Mark, next slide. And I think I'm handing this off to Darla.
Yeah. So a personal statement obviously is an indication of your priorities and your interests. It's a story that is uniquely you. It's a really unusual genre of writing because it's trying to be a narrative that tells a story, an argument that makes a case for yourself, and a reflective resume, but not an actual resume at the same time. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk through some of the ways that a personal statement can be an effective narrative, an effective argument, and an effective reflective resume. Mark, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So thinking about a personal statement as a narrative, it's all about your trajectory academically in terms of your career. It's meant to connect the dots between the past and the present and the future, though not necessarily in that order. So a personal statement could start with a vision. There you are, the foremost scholar of women map makers in World War II, an historian who travels the world giving presentations. You could start with a vision and then go back to where that particular interest came from and think through what the next several years in a professional degree and a graduate degree could help you achieve. So a narrative is going to answer such questions as, what led to your interest? Where did this interest come from? What are you doing right now to prepare for graduate school and your future goals? If applicable, do you know what you want to research, specialize in specifically? What type of work or research do you see yourself doing? But you want to tell the story in a way that is engaging and interesting and uniquely you, so that when the reader finishes reading it, they have a sense of your voice, that if they sat down at a table with you right now, they would have an idea of who they're going to meet. So it shouldn't sound like anyone could have written this. It shouldn't sound like a generic vision of what a future biologist or historian or doctor might say. It should really reflect who you are and your personal story. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So on top of being a narrative, personal statement also has to be an argument. And you know from writing research papers here at Temple that an argument, to be convincing, has to have compelling, specific evidence. And it has to be organized in a way that makes a strong case, right? So just as you would do for any paper at Temple, you want to make sure that you're listing, including specific evidence for why you are going to succeed in this rigorous graduate program, whatever it might be, and evidence that you are going to make a difference in your field, that you have what it takes to succeed. So that evidence can come from your experiences, right? What research, coursework, internships, volunteer opportunities, jobs have helped prepare you to excel in the program that you're pursuing and in your discipline or field. And sometimes you do not want to do bullet 2, which is to say, why do you belong in this specific program or school? For example, if you are applying to most programs in the health professions, it's a common application. So you should not say anything about a specific school. But if, like me, you're pursuing a PhD in the humanities, in my case, English here at Temple, my personal statement for graduate school listed not only why Temple and not only why this department, but why these particular faculty members would be important to my journey as a scholar. So you want to make sure that you're aiming your argument to the right audience, whether it's a common app or a specific program, and you want to make sure that your argument is clear, compelling, has strong evidence, and that your tone is professional. You sound like someone who could someday be the reader's peer, right? You're going to be their student, and someday you're going to be their colleague when you graduate from the program. So you want to project that professional tone in your personal statement. And finally, so on top of being a story, a narrative, and an argument, you're also wanting to reflect on your resume. But please do not think that you're supposed to list what's on your resume. You want to respect your reader by trusting and knowing that they already have all the information on your resume in front of them when they're looking at your personal statement. So what you want to do is pull out highlights from your resume that you can use as evidence for your case. So it shouldn't repeat the description of what it says on the resume, but you might refer to it so they can look back at it and then use that experience, the academic experience, the volunteer experience, or the internship to illustrate why you are ready. To illustrate that you know how to reflect on your experiences, you have self-awareness, and you're aware of your growth as a human being, and how these highlights from your resume are going to prepare you to succeed. So what's special, unique, distinctive, and/or impressive about you or your life story? And let's just pause and say that that is hard. It's uncomfortable to look back at your own life and think, am I special? What is unique about me? What skills do I have? And what I recommend to students is talk to the people in your life. Ask your parents, ask your best friends, ask your professors, what do you see in me that you think would make me a really interesting applicant? Or what do you think stands out about me? Make lists, think about it, self-reflect, and then speak that truth so that the reader has a sense of you uniquely. And right, last bullet point there, what details of your life might help the committee better understand you or help set you apart from other applicants? So you want to be thinking about, like, how will this committee have a sense of who I am uniquely and what's special about me?
Thank you very much, Darla. Well done. So Darla had mentioned about how a personal statement should be a narrative, should be sharing your personal story. It should be an argument set in a professional tone and list and talk through some of those experiences that you've developed along the way. We also need to take your personal statement and consider it in a direction in which you should avoid certain things, avoid particular things. And so the next few slides, I'm going to talk through these particular pitfalls that you may want to consider avoiding in your personal statement. So in a nutshell, what you're seeing on this slide, my piece of advice to you in terms of the pitfalls to avoid is that you want to keep your personal statement general, but not too general. You also don't want to be too personal, but personal enough in your personal statement. So we're going to talk through some of those things. It's best that your personal statement not include statements very generic, such as, I'm passionate about a particular area, or I'd like to help people. Rather than including statements such as these, it's important that you elaborate and you talk about your experiences and show how you are passionate about a particular field and show how you like to help people. So one of the things that Darla had mentioned is the importance of reflection. And it's important to take a seat back and to think about these experiences that you've had, not only what you've had, but also what you've gained from them. And if you reflect on your experiences, you will be able to back up these general statements and talk about and provide evidence of how you are passionate and how you like to help people. And those sorts of contexts are important to keep in your personal statement. But at the same time, it's really important that your personal statement is not necessarily too personal. It might be including an event that you learned from, and it's important that rather than including something negative or something that was traumatic in a negative experience, that you rather talk about how you overcame a particular issue or an experience. I think it's also important that you don't approach a personal statement in necessarily a dramatic way or think that it needs to be approached in a creative writing way, just so it stands out to the reader. It's supposed to be telling your story. If there's something that stands out to you in terms of your trajectory and where you've come up into this point, that is okay. But you don't necessarily need to feel that you need to put something out there very dramatic to appeal to the reader's attention. Next slide, please, Mark. Okay. Another particular pitfalls to avoid is giving your life story. Many of you are applying for grad schools, professional schools, law schools, and when applying to these types of application, you're coming up to character limitations that you'll be held to for your personal statement. So you don't necessarily have the space to be writing your whole life story, nor should you think that a personal statement for your next career path needs to include your whole life story. What my recommendation is for you to start by building an outline of particular experiences that stand out in mind, and that with those experiences, you can see the connections between them. You build those connections, you build out some reflection between those experiences, and it helps to shape a very solid personal statement. Secondly, it's very important as you build your personal statement that you make it sound like you. Yes, it is a professional piece of writing, but it also needs to sound like you. And if you're a Friends fanatic of the Friends sitcom, perhaps you remember the episode where Joey was creating his personal statement. So I myself was a pretty big Friends fan. And Joey was put into a situation where he was creating a statement to showcase his ability to get an acting role. And yes, Melvin, it is a hilarious segment. He's using all big elaborate words, none of which when put together made any sense, but it sounded, what he says, you know, over the top and impressive. These are things that you don't want to do for your own personal statement. You want it to sound naturally like you. And of course, when put together, you want the words to make sense. So what we suggest as a solution to this is to write clearly, concisely, and to the point. You should be using your own voice, and it should sound like you usually would, perhaps not talking with your friends, but it should have a professional tone. Next slide, please. So finally, some other additional pitfalls to avoid. This is your personal statement, and the audience that you are writing to, the admissions committee, they want to get a chance to meet you. They're going to be reading your application, but your personal statement is that piece of writing that they want to get to see who you are. It may not be a story about other people that you perhaps care about, or it's not all about an event that's taking place in society or another country. It is about you. It's about connecting the dots between your experiences, and it's showcasing why you are ready for this next step on your career trajectory. Another thing that we had mentioned through Darla's segment is that a personal statement is a reflective resume. But as Darla mentioned before, we're not reiterating your whole resume. So what we ask for you to do is pull out those pieces of your resume that you would like to capture in your personal statement and elaborate and reflect on specific things. You don't necessarily need to take your resume and then bring it to your personal statement, nor do you feel like you need to be chronological about particular things that you decide to include in your personal statement. Next slide, please.
Okay, so you're ready to write. One of the first things you need to be careful about is to read the prompts for your graduate school application. If they might call it a personal statement, they might call it a statement of purpose. They might have a series of shorter essays. You have to be very careful about answering the questions that you are asked. Some of them could be pretty specific, like the first sample prompt in an essay of approximately 500 words, which is really short, by the way. State your purpose in undertaking graduate study. And you can include things like your academic and research interests, career objectives, and how a degree from the school will help you achieve these goals. This is a pretty standard like prompts for a personal statement. And if you, in your application, it says something like submit a personal statement, you could follow this bullet and be pretty safe with it. The second option, this was another one that we've seen, please attach a statement of about 2 pages. Now this doesn't actually say single space, double space, word count. Interpret it how you want, describing important or unusual aspects of yourself, not otherwise apparent in your application. So this one might have two statements. This one might be more of a personal statement, and perhaps they have a research statement as well. I know that a lot of them can also be really challenging, and they'll say, like, just tell us about why you want to be a physician. So a lot of pre-health or health professions applications will have a very general prompt like that. And that final one, really, how have your background and life experiences, including cultural, geographical, financial, educational, citizenship status, or other opportunities or challenges, motivated your decision to pursue a graduate degree at this university? This suggests to me that this university is looking for diversity, because they're telling you, we want to know about your background. Same thing, this sample prompt might have had 2 essays, and this was one of them, and perhaps there's another that's more on research. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at a few samples. I believe that some of you who had pre-registered got these samples in advance, and perhaps some of you have read them. We'll give you time to refresh your memory, or if this is the first you're seeing them, you'll have time to read them as well. But what we're going to try to do in chat, so this is, you know, a little bit hard, but we're going to give it a shot. At each example, look at what you think works well. And I want you to try to do this. You might see, like, I don't think that anything works well. Well, pretend as if you are us. You're sitting down to help a student, and this is what they submitted to you. What would you ask them to build on? What do you think the applicant would need to do to further their development, to develop their ideas more? Is there some nugget or phrase in the paragraph you'd recommend that the student develop in their next draft? Okay, next slide. In our first sample, I'll give a minute for everybody to read this for the first time or a refresher. Okay, so you're already starting to give us some things. Unnatural language, it doesn't sound too many big words, kind of vague, didn't elaborate enough. They should show and not tell. Great, you guys you definitely picking up on what we talked about. Okay, now I want to put you in that second shoe, the shoes, our shoes. If this student were working with you and you wanted to help them, what here do you think that this student could tell us more about to help us get a better picture of the candidate? So what could make this, again, the big words, absolutely. So stop using the big words. But what someone just said, misfortunes, absolutely. People, a lot of these, they want to see obstacles that you've overcome. So that could be something. Yes, Alina talks about their background and how they would add to the diversity. Definitely. Why do you think? Show us how you would help bring diversity to the program. And I see some of you are using this expression, jurisprudential system. What would be an easier, what could anyone say instead of that? Judicial law, right? Kristen, you got it. Like, you could just, I'm interested in law. Again, sort of, this is like, bring it down. But yeah, you all got it. Like, there's things in here that the student could be talking about, their background, what they bring to the diversity. The student mentions demonstrated graduate success. Did they go to graduate school before law school? I would want something about that. Yes, I agree. Several people have brought up the LSAT score. Look at that final sentence. This would be an example of a statement that probably any applicant could say. You never want a sentence like that. You never want a sentence where any applicant could say. Now, maybe they wouldn't, but they could. So toss it. And yes, you all are right. The LSAT score will be elsewhere. You don't need to mention that in your personal statement. Great. So you really could see, now some of these samples are a little bit exaggerated because it helps you to see things. Similar to sample 2. Do you want to change the slide and we can see this next one? So I'll give you a minute to read or refresh. Okay. Self-absorbed, repetitive. They're too much focus on others, bad grammar, no need to mention his parents. Well, you all are picking up chip on their shoulder. Too pompous, definitely. Tooting his own horn. So you got that. What could this student, what would you do if this student came to you? What would you encourage him to do? So instead of just writing that you have potential, talk about why. Everyone's agreeing with that. Could be more specific about medical school. I'm going to call on Kimberly because I think this is a pre-health student. So what would you have done with this student?
So I'm seeing in the chat the comments, and they're totally to the point and what I would suggest for this student. I would say the best piece of advice that I would start with this student is calling into the experiences that the actual experiences in medicine that the student had to date, rather than focusing on what the student has been given, and changing it to those experiences that the student has had and how they have grown from those experiences, but also taking it to a different direction in terms of asking the student about those experiences and how others have benefited from having he or she as a volunteer in that medical profession. So I say this to any pre-professional student out there. It's so great to highlight on those experiences and the meaning of those experiences in preparation to professional school, but also thinking about these same experiences when building out your personal statement as well. It's not only about having these experiences, it's about reflecting on what you have learned from them. And that is what should be captured in your essay.
And I would add, and I see Christy makes a comment about storytelling. Like if this student brought me this paragraph or an essay with this as the opening paragraph, I wouldn't even bring this up. All I would do is, and it sounds like Kimberly would be doing the same thing, just talking with them, trying to brainstorm stories and try to pulling from them what really excites them about medical school, what has prepared them, etc. And this opening paragraph would probably be totally scrapped for one of those stories that came up through conversation. I also just want to stress this. First drafts are usually pretty bad. And so you shouldn't be afraid of this. We all see this sample and it's so easy to see that it's not going to help the student, but it's not uncommon for all of us to have first drafts that are quite bad. So you got to get over that fear of perfection. And strive to get anything down, knowing that whatever you get down will spark conversation with yourself or with other people who are reading it that will help you to get a pretty good second draft, a much better third draft, and a pretty, a very good fourth draft, we hope. Okay, sample 3. Give you a minute. Well, you all got it. So it's too much about Grandma Betty and not enough about the student. Now, what could they do?
I gotta just say that the Grandma Betty's gotta go has me cracking up.
Me too. You all are so on the head with this. Right on.
But I will say, I get this kind of thing a lot because you've had an inspirational person in your life. So how could we not throw away Grandma Betty, but make this into a personal statement? Okay, so yes, I'm seeing somebody, Kayla, saying relate grandma's experience to themselves and how it influenced them. Yeah, and what they did with that. So maybe Grandma Betty stays in, but for a sentence or two, and then you talk about what you've done because she inspired you. Again, it depends. Some people are saying like, no, you got to ditch Grandma Betty totally. At times I have students draft, say like, let's try three different things. Keep this one, get one without Grandma Betty, and then give a compromise, one with a little bit of Betty, but not too much. And then you can see which is most effective. This student to me is a decent writer. So this is an easy person to work with. Probably would be very receptive to brainstorming. And as soon as you said like, oh, there's too much with Grandma Betty, my guess is this person would get like, oh yeah, this is what I need to do. Okay, let's go to it. Okay, sample 4. This is our final example. Yeah, well, we didn't want to give you like 4 bad examples, right? Like, so one of the reasons that we wanted an example like this is because students often ask us about how to talk about a change in their major. And often that ends up being very dry because they talk about the process perhaps of talking about it with their academic advisor, then having to do all the paperwork, and it was a big life-changing experience. And that's what this is not a first draft. This was actually the student's final draft before sending it off to grad school applications. But in the early versions, it was all about like being an architecture student and that switch to political science, and it was kind of dull. And then if you focus much more, so anyone here, and I'm assuming there's some of you who've changed a major and think like, that's my story, that's going to be what I write about for my opening paragraph. It can be very successful like this one, but think about what was it that motivated that change in major? Maybe that's what you write about, like this student. It was that the Ukrainian situation, the invasion from Russia, and that was what gave him focus he didn't have before. But it could also be something else. It could be that you changed your major for some dull reason, but after you changed it, all of these other things fell into place and you took action. Like that might be what you focus on. But don't get bogged down in like bureaucratic detail with changing your major. Some of you were saying like, oh, someone's asking, are these real personal statements? Some of them are. Some of them, I think 2 of them, sample 4 and sample 2 are, right? Kimberly, number 2, right? Others are real, but we got them from other sources. So some people are asking like, is there anything that needs to change in this essay? What do you guys think? If you were reading this, is there anything, someone commented that they thought the second half wasn't as strong. So do any of you think that there's something else this student could have done? Darla's comment. Better flow, a little dry. A specific class. Now, again, I think that the student in the second paragraph talked a little bit more about like specific courses that he or she took. A professor, again, this is an opening paragraph mentioning a professor at that university. He absolutely did that. And that was towards the end. I remember from past workshops, some people wanted to know where this military service came from, like that there was no indication that that's where he was going. I will say that this student got into all of his master's degree programs and even got some money. So someone was mentioning that this is a little dry. And this gets back to that the thing about sometimes you want to start with a story, but sometimes there isn't a real story to start with, and you don't want to force opening with the story if it's not best for you. It also wasn't in the student's personality. Like, this is kind of a reflection of that student. So some students are able to start with the story and pull it off, and other students, maybe it's not quite that, it's not going to be quite as dramatic. It really is going to come down to you. I should also say, for any of you pursuing like a PhD program, it would be much more likely that in your opening paragraph, you're going to jump right into research. There's going to be less perhaps of the storytelling and more focus on research than you would for other sorts of programs. This was a master's program that had a research component. So I think he struck an okay balance between sort of some of the practical and some indication of a research interest. Yeah, somebody's saying maybe it could be more personal. Maybe it could be. It worked. So in the end, that's what we want, right? Okay, I will. Any other questions or comments, or do we go next slide, Mark?
Yep. So
okay,
next
Mark,
slide.
You're up.
Yep. So what I want to share here, basically what we've done so far, we've actually gone over a lot of really practical kind of tips, overarching kind of ideas on how to construct your personal statement. And then we went over some specific examples. Kind of did a little bit of just kind of shopping and kind of going over those personal statement examples. And then kind of just want to end today's time just going over some practical pieces of advice, just some additional advice that might be helpful to you as you construct your personal statements. So just kind of with where to start. So one of the things that was brought up a little bit earlier was you want to use stories as you kind of go through your personal statement. You don't want to just, reiterate your resume. But it's also important to really structure your document as well. It's important to make sure that it has a good flow. And what I wanted to share with folks is something that I use all the time as I talk to students. I want to give you just a couple of themes that you want to keep in mind as you are drafting your personal statement. So the first one here is motivations and interests. And we talked about this a little bit before, but somewhere within your personal statement, you want to share your motivation for that field of study, for that particular discipline. How did you become interested in that particular area? Also, I think for doctoral programs, other specific areas, it's really important to give your interests. What are your interests within that discipline? So one theme that you want to make sure that you kind of go over within your personal statement are these motivations and interests. Another theme that you want to make sure you kind of go over are your experience and skills. Even though they will have your resume, I think it's still important for you to kind of really show them what experiences have you had that have prepared you for graduate school. So you're still thinking within the idea of stories, but think about what experiences can I share that have demonstrated that I would be ready for graduate school, that I'm ready for this particular experience. Maybe there's certain skills, leadership skills, critical thinking skills that you've been able to demonstrate. Try to show those things within your personal statement. So that would be a second theme that you want to cover. It was also brought up about goals for graduate school. So when you are applying to a professional school, maybe something within the health professions, there's probably a lot of centralized applications and you're writing one personal statement to a lot of different schools. So you have to be a little bit more broad about what your goals are for graduate school. You can't address them to a specific school. But if you were in the humanities or social sciences, other disciplines as well, sometimes you're writing to specific programs. And I think there, it is important for you to highlight the features of that particular program. Maybe they have an internship and that's something that you're excited about, or they have a certain set of courses that you think would be really valuable. You would highlight those specific things if you are writing to a program directly. And then one other thing that you might want to keep in mind is your future career goals. I think you should kind of give them an idea of what you hope to do after finishing graduate school. So you don't always have to know exactly, but giving them a sense of what you would like to become. I think that that's something that you would also want to include within your personal statement. So one thing I like to tell people is just, again, if you look at these 4 themes right here, you can use this as a little bit of an outline. What stories might you want to share? You can share those stories, but you want to actually use this kind of as an outline, maybe to actually format this personal statement that you're writing. So you could use this exact format, the way it's listed right now, or maybe you'll move around some of these different themes. But I think that these 4 themes could be helpful to you if you need like a framework for how do I actually write my personal statement. Also someone, we had talked a little bit about what is the order? Should it be chronological, your personal statement? And it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could start off like Darla brought up in the beginning about with a vision of like what you want to become or where you see yourself in the future. And then maybe you go back through some of your past experiences, and then you come back through your present and then to the future again. So you can have it flow in a few different ways, but something to really keep in mind, and this is where the Writing Center can be really helpful to you, is your verb tense, is your timeline. Sometimes I'm talking to students or I'm reading their personal statement and I'm completely lost on where we are in the timeline, or the verbs that they're using, or the language, the tense that they're writing in is actually not appropriate for where they are in the story. So really keep in mind the language that you're using as you tell the story. Try to make sure that it's coherent and it makes sense, even if you're jumping around from different parts. So keep in mind those 4 themes, as well as the timeline of your story. These are some practical tips that you can hold on to. Something that has kind of been stated over and over again is that, your first draft of your personal statement doesn't have to be your final draft. Sometimes I think we want to just knock it out of the park immediately, but sometimes it takes multiple drafts for your personal statement to actually be strong, for it to be effective. So don't be afraid to reach out for feedback, and reach out for feedback from multiple people. So we're going to talk about the Writing Center, fellowship advising, pre-professional health studies, the Career Center, but also your advisors and also faculty. You can ask multiple people for feedback on your drafts, and you'll probably get a different perspective from each one of them. If you were to ask me about your personal statement, my background's in education, it's in psychology, I'm going to offer certain experiences. But if you were to ask Barbara or Kim about the personal statement, they might share from different experiences as well. And it's good to get a mix of multiple people's kind of feedback and take it with a grain of salt. I think that's another important thing. You want to listen to what you're being told, but everybody's coming from a certain vantage point. Take all that feedback into consideration, and then you'll draft your personal statement. But just don't be satisfied necessarily with just one draft of it. It might take a few different times, and it's good to get feedback from multiple people. And that's what we're all here to do for you at Temple University, is to be support to you as you're drafting these documents. So I want to share with you, we'll kind of end with just kind of talking about what are some of the resources that you can kind of use as you are starting to draft your personal statement. So we have the Writing Center, and I'm definitely going to give in a moment Darla an opportunity to talk about the Writing Center, but the Writing Center I think is an amazing resource to go to for support. They even have an option there that's kind of like e-tutoring, where you can actually submit your document, that you could have a little bit of time. Someone's going to review it and actually email it back to you. So they have that e-tutoring option. So I think that's a really great resource to use. You can talk to fellowship advising at Barbara's office. You can also come to the Career Center. I'm actually one of 5 career coaches. So there's many of us that can actually sit down with you and actually go over your personal statement, of course, over virtually, but we'll go over your personal statement. And then also the Office of Pre-Professional Health Studies. So if you are thinking about the health professions, you're going to want to talk to Kim's team about your personal statement, and there's a process specifically for that. So I do have all of our websites pulled up if we want to go to them. But I just wanted to leave it open for everyone that's on the call, because these are all our offices. Do you want to share what's maybe is the easiest way for someone to get in contact with your office if they want support with their personal statement?
I can go first since I'm the Writing Center is listed first. I put in the chat the URL for how you can book appointments and my personal email, and I'm happy to answer questions you have. I do want to say that at the Writing Center, we can help you with your personal statement at any stage in your writing process, from just reading the prompt and brainstorming to coming up with, you know, that iffy first draft. That's a really important part of the process, to revising that draft and revising it, and to always the proofreading stage at the end. So when you make an appointment at the Writing Center, you can actually select to filter the staff list to only see personal statement specialists. And these are tutors who have had supplemental training and coaching from me and how to help writers with personal statements specifically.
Darla, there's a chat question if there's tutors during the summer or only during breaks, or is it only during the semester? Yeah, so typically we only have tutoring during the semesters, and then we have it also for summer 1 and summer 2. I'm not positive about this winter. I don't think we will be offering tutoring between the semesters, but we are open all the way through the last day of finals. So hopefully that helps somewhat as well. And then for fellowships, and I'll go next since I'm on the list, with fellowships advising, again, the bulk of our work is with students who are applying for scholarships and fellowships, and there's personal statements that are part of that. But we also work with students who are applying for graduate school. Typically, we will read graduate school personal statements the whole year. We are open during the summer, but not from like mid-August to mid-October, which is our peak advising period. But any other time, yes. I would say that we specialize in students applying for PhD programs and law school. That just has come from practice. My TA is a PhD candidate in anthropology. I have my PhD in Latin American literature. But I've also worked with students who are applying for just about anything else. You can make appointments with us through Handshake. So you can find us that way. And you can also just Google or search for fellowships advising from the Temple homepage to find our home, or when we send this slide out, you'll have the URL.
I guess I'll go next. I was actually going to have you go next, Kim, and then I will kind of show everybody where they can find things on the website.
Good deal. Thank you, Mark. So if you are interested in going to professional school in the health professions, you are welcome to share your personal statement with Pre-Professional Health Studies. We have a resource that we use to help our students prepare for their application to professional school called an e-portfolio. And a part of the e-portfolio is in fact completing a draft of a personal statement that we will work with you along the way from the time you submit an e-portfolio to the time that you apply to professional school. So that is one pathway. But we also have personal statement appointments separate from e-portfolio, and it's arranged just like a typical advising appointment. The only difference is we want for you to share your personal statement with us in advance to your appointment so that we can review it and be ready to deliver feedback during the time of your appointment. If you end up taking a gap year, I did see a mention of gap year in the chat. If you are taking a gap year from your undergraduate to professional school, we are more than happy to work with you, and we'll continue working with you in your personal statement. And if you were to mention taking a gap year in your personal statement when applying to professional school, you would want to make sure that you are talking about how you took advantage of this gap year and the types of experiences that you were involved in throughout that gap year.
And I could add to that too, because I would just not call it a gap year. You graduated and then what did you do? So I know for students who often like apply for the Fulbright and see that as a gap year, I just say, just don't call it a gap year. Just you tell us what you did. It's sort of what Kimberly said, focus on what you did. Yeah, I
Right.
think it
Yeah.
looks like Darla's answering the same way.
Yeah. And so
Growth here.
at the Career Center, it's very similar to fellowship advising, where you could actually go through Handshake to be able to set up an appointment with a member of our team. And I actually thought it'd be much easier just to kind of show you right on the website how you do this. And so I have everybody's actual services pulled up here. But if you were on the Career Center website, very simple to kind of get there. All you actually need to do is scroll down on our homepage, and you'll see an option right here about talk to a career coach. So it will take you right to Handshake, and then you can set up an appointment specifically on personal statement writing. So definitely feel free to do that. You can meet with me, you can meet with any of the career coaching team. And I think it's also helpful, kind of like Kim shared, it is helpful to send the personal statement in advance. That gives us more time to be able to read it and then to give you the best feedback. So I think that's always something to do. You'll get this information, but here is Pre-Professional Health Studies website. So you can actually go there as well to be able to get more information. The Student Success Center is also listed here. And I believe, Darla, if you scroll down here, schedule an appointment, the writing tutors, that's exactly how you'll do that. And then also the Office of Scholar Development and Fellowship Advising, their information is right here.
Right here, appointments. Yeah, you can see in that middle section.
Yep. Okay, so you can go right there. So yes, very easy to reach us all through our websites. And so that's the practical how to actually connect with us for more work to go over your personal statement. And with our last bit of time, just want to leave it open for Q&A. If there are any questions that anyone has, we can try to answer those. We got about 8 more minutes.
And I do see that somebody asked about like a gap year due to COVID. If you just mean that you, again, I would stress what Kim says about concentrating on what you did during that period. And keep in mind that every student across the United States is experiencing perhaps setbacks or lost opportunities or delayed opportunities because of COVID. So you're not alone in that. You're not going to be the only applicant whose internship was cut short or didn't even start because of it. But see what you can do instead of that. So there's a lot of things to say from there, but you can talk with any of us about how to talk about what you did or didn't do during COVID.
Interesting question here. How do you distinguish yourself from those coming from Ivy League institutions?
Well, the students who are applying for fellowships are competing with students who are coming from Ivies and other elite institutions. My peer at Penn, one thing he has said to me is like, well, the students at Penn don't have the same stories that students from Temple. I mean, a lot of you might have very interesting backgrounds. Maybe you were working for 40 hours a week, working full-time while the student full-time. That's not happening with the Penn students. You've got a story right from there. So thinking about the stories that you have that, the students at elite institutions might not have because of that privileged background. So probably other things that we could say about that, but there's many ways to highlight your unique qualities. It's not all about having gone to an elite institution.
Do you see COVID-19 impacting graduate school admissions? Like, should I be prepared that school will not be taking new students? Just a little bit broader.
You know what I would do? If I would talk with at least like your department to see how it's being handled at Temple. It's really hard to say how all graduate programs might be handling this. You should also feel comfortable reaching out to like the coordinator of admissions at the program that you're looking at. They most likely will be as transparent as they can be, saying perhaps they normally accept 20 new students, but next year they're only going to accept 10 new students, or they're putting admissions on hold, which I doubt because most places need that revenue. Like, they're going to want to continue, not just from a financial perspective, but from the continuity of their program. Might they be more competitive? Yes, generally when there's a financial downturn, more people apply to graduate school because they're not finding jobs. But faculty in your departments are a good resource. They also have colleagues at other schools and might be aware of what's happening in your field in terms of graduate studies.
I do like this one question. It kind of goes into something we talked about before. For those applying to PhD programs, just any general advice when applying to PhD programs as it relates to the personal statement, but also if you're changing fields, if you're going in to maybe a very different field than what maybe your master's degree is in or your bachelor's degree is in. Any advice with the personal statement?
Mark, were those two separate questions or was that the same?
They're kind of together. Yeah, they're kind of joined.
Well, PhD programs in general, you're going to be focusing more on research. You know, the first research experience that turned you on to research, your evolution as a researcher, what you're hoping to do. I mean, Darla was talking a little bit about this in relation to her own experience, what faculty you'd want to work with. And if you're transitioning, you really need to convince them this sort of how are you prepared to do this is super important. So perhaps it's that you weren't a major in environmental studies, but you took a lot of environmental studies courses. So you're able to transition from political science to environmental studies because of that coursework plus these internships that you did. But because it's not perhaps going to be as obvious on your transcript, you're going to have to show it through your personal statement. It really will be critical for anyone making that sort of transition. And I don't know if, Darla, you have anything to add about that.
I did there was one other question it seemed like was brought up, and I think this comes up sometimes, which is you're writing to multiple schools and you're wondering about how much you should tailor the personal statement. I've seen people who they might write the first 4 or 5 paragraphs like all the same way, and then one paragraph is just a change for that specific school. What are your thoughts on how you should draft the personal statement to multiple schools, same field?
I think that's a good strategy if the programs are very similar. It's like if you're applying, like I did, to multiple programs in English, most of the programs were more or less the same. So I could change out a couple of sentences to tailor it to the school. But in my field, like a lot of fields, there were different sub-focuses, like a traditional research PhD versus a creative writing PhD. And in those cases, there was more substantial difference. So it just depends on how similar the schools are to each other. And Kim also added that there's often supplemental essays where you can further tailor your responses to the specific school. So if that's an opportunity that you have as part of your application, your personal statement can be the same personal statement with a couple of sentences changed.
Agreed.
I think that's great. So we are actually right at time. So I think we'll close out, but you have our contact information, how to reach our offices, and then this presentation, this recording, as well as this PowerPoint will be out by tomorrow evening. You'll be able to get all that information. So look for that. But we just want to thank you all for giving us this time to be able to talk with you about personal statement writing. I just, I think a round of applause to all the speakers. Everyone here is very talented and just skilled at writing and just being able to advise students. So just glad to be here on this call with this great team. And yeah, so I think that we're done for the day. I think this has been great. Thank you all for coming out.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wait, where will we be able to find the PowerPoint for this?
It's going to
So
be
we'll-
sent out.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Have a good day.